Hello, this is Catherine Dubberly, the Answer Lady. I'm a big fan of Kiss Looms. I greatly enjoy mine, and I am cooperating with Kelly at Kiss Looms to make you a playlist of all the basic techniques that you might ever want to know on all of the looms. So welcome and enjoy.
On a Kiss loom like this one, you can use all of the pegs if you want to make a straight piece by knitting around the corners. These sliders will adjust so that however you've got your board set up, in this case I've got two washers between my pin boards and my peg boards, so I can slide this out farther if I need bigger stitches and in tighter if I need smaller stitches. This piece of knitting was made with the board adjusted just as it is. This is the correct distance. This one is too far away right now, and I knitted it like that so you would see. In here we turned the corner over here, and you really cannot tell which stitch it was done on. I can't tell now because it was spaced just right. Over here there's a sloppy row of stitches. You can see the unevenness as I hold it up. I started out with the stitches spaced too, or this slider spaced too far in, and then I purposely moved it too far out so you could see the unpleasant effects we get. So how do we make certain that we're getting it right? There are several ways. One of them is experience. You will get to know roughly where to start, but you should always check and double check. Now what makes the stitches even is for the distance that the yarn travels to be the same between these pegs every stitch as it is going around this peg. And there's an optical illusion that will fool you because these pins are behind their respective pegs. But these pins actually do have to do with this peg and the stitches it surrounds. But because they're not oriented the same, it's hard to visually judge the distance, which is why I use this fancy measuring device. I knot a loop into a piece of cotton yarn. The reason for cotton is that it doesn't stretch very much. Now let's come over here and make the distance of a stitch, and I'm marking with my thumbnail where that is. Now if I hang my loop on this peg, my thumbnail should come to the very center of this peg as it did over here, even though the pegs are oriented differently, and my thumbnail in fact does. There is another way to do it if it's easier for you. We could measure all the way around the peg and back to the next pin. I'm marking that one with my index fingernail. So in this case we go like this, and it's still working. The closer your yarn lengths are to identical, the harder it will be to see
Where the corner was.
the corner is turned invisibly. So let's fix this one while you watch. Loosen up so I can slide. I'm going to slide it so that to my eyes it visually matches the other one pretty close, because I already know that knitted well. And you'll learn to do that based on your experience. Now let's measure another stitch yarn length. There we go. And measure. I'm pretty close. Do you see that my thumbnail is actually almost over to the other edge of the peg? I think that means I still need to nudge this in. No, out. Just a hair. Just a hair. Okay, let's recheck. There's my length. Aha! That will probably be just right. Now, I would encourage you to swatch anyway. If you're going to make a big project in special yarn, you don't want to find out many rows later, when this has finally come out and relaxed enough that you can get a good look at it, that you were mistaken. It would be so much easier to make a swatch like this one right now. Let's cast on and knit a couple rows together so you get a clear idea how the whole corner turn works. I'm going to put a loop onto that peg. I don't need to knit this whole side because we know it's going to be fine. I do need to turn the corners, and in my opinion, it's simply going to be just as easy to go ahead across one side and around the corner as to do two littler swatches. So we'll cast on the far board, which we've already done. E-wrap is not, in my opinion, the prettiest of cast-ons, but for a swatch that really is not an important feature, and it is fast. So I'm E-wrapping. And now at least 3 stitches over here. To be safe, I think I'll do 4. And now we just start wrapping, and we'll go back and forth making a flat panel. And my personal opinion is that my stitches come out more even if I do all the wrapping and then all the knitting over. We knitters vary considerably in what style works best for us. So you may prefer to do it stitch by stitch, and the knitting police are not going to come after you. I am not going to tell. These really are personal decisions. If that works well for you, go for it. I think that I like to wrap the whole thing because I can keep the tension in my hand even if I keep the motion continuous. For me, that's a good approach. That's a stitch just like all the rest of them, so I treat it exactly the same. It just so happens that when I reach it, it's time to turn the loom so I can access the other side. But there's no real difference. In the next wrap, we'll discuss the use of the pins. It's obvious once you've done it for a while, but if you're a new knitter, you might appreciate. Whoops. Don't do what I just did. If your yarn splits, all kinds of unpleasant things will occur. And here we go around the second corner. Now this, I am making a flat panel, but if I wanted to make a tube, for example, making socks, a tubular scarf, a pair of leg warmers, I could just knit on around, and we go around and around, always wrapping and knitting in one direction. For a flat panel, we go back and forth. Let's start that again. From this peg, I'm going to do what is called slipping the first stitch. That just really means don't wrap it and don't knit it. And for many things, that makes a nice edge. Behind the pin, in front of the peg, behind, in front. Same over here, behind the pin, in front of the peg. Behind the pin, in front of the peg. There really isn't a difference, you're just changing directions. But the action that you're taking as you wrap the loom doesn't change. Your perspective on it changes a little bit, that's all. In front of the peg, behind the pin, in front of the peg, behind the pin, and alternating on around. There is a slight tendency, if you're a new knitter, to change the tension in your hand or the tightness with which you hold the yarn as you round the corner. Concentrate on keeping your hand tension and your pressure on the yarn the same. It won't take very long to learn to do it, and that will play into keeping the stitches even. But because of the way the loom is designed, most of the length of yarn that goes into every stitch is actually determined by the loom. So if we set it up correctly, and we don't do something very odd with our wrapping technique, the stitches don't have much choice but to come out even.